Today, we delve into the chilling case of the Father from Hell, Richard Gene Simmons. The Father from Hell, a nickname Ronald Gene Simmons received while incarcerated, may not be harsh enough. He was controlling, strict, abusive, and a murderer. Simmons not only took out his entire immediate family, he also killed his own grandchildren-in-laws, and even a couple of people with whom he only had brief encounters. It turned out to be the single biggest family mass murder the United States has ever seen. 16 people in all lost their lives, with 14 of them being related to Simmons either by blood or by marriage. And perhaps making this story even more tragic is it all happened over the Christmas holiday in 1987. A time when most families would come together to celebrate and share joy in their lives. Richard Gene Simmons was born in 1940 and had an average middle-class childhood. At the age of 17, he signed up for the United States Navy, dropping out of high school to do so. While he was stationed in Washington, he met Becky Ulibarri and the two had an instant connection. They married in 1960. Throughout the next 20-plus years, Simmons made the military a career, choosing to switch to the Air Force in 1963. During this time, he and Becky also had 7 children: Ronald Gene Simmons Jr., Sheila, William, Loretta, Eddie, Marianne, and Rebecca Lynn. It seemed he had the picturesque family and a great life going for him. His wife seemed happy and devoted, and the military recognized him with a Bronze Star, a ribbon for marksmanship in the Air Force, and the Republic of Vietnam Cross. His children knew him as a strict father. His house was kept clean and orderly, with the kids expected to do all of the housework or be severely punished. If there weren't any chores available, Simmons would make some up. The kids were always working, often not even knowing what they were working toward. The children also knew Simmons to be a little paranoid. For example, he would order even the smallest children to carry heavy blocks to help build a privacy wall around his house. Above everything else, Simmons wanted to keep outsiders away from his family. It was his way of maintaining the control and the order within the household. Perhaps one of the reasons Simmons wanted his life to be private was because of his daughter Sheila. At the age of 13, she started receiving special attention from her father. He thought she was beautiful and would often shower her with compliments and special favors. When she turned 17, however, things drastically changed for her as Simmons began to sexually assault and rape her. By the time Sheila was 18 years old, Simmons fathered a child with her, a girl named Sylvia. She was both Simmons' daughter and granddaughter. The schools Sheila attended started to have their suspicions about the pregnancy, and started to launch an investigation into the Simmons household, citing incest and sexual abuse. As soon as Richard Gene caught wind of this plan, he packed up the family and moved several states away, to Arkansas, thereby avoiding any legal trouble that might have come his way. A few years later, he moved to a different city in Arkansas, though the reasons remain unclear. Some family members speculate he had feared for his freedom once again. Around this time, Simmons confessed to Becky the true nature of his and Sheila's relationship, and exactly who the father of the baby was. He ordered Becky to keep her mouth shut about it and raise the child as her own. Becky, for unknown reasons, chose to stay with Simmons and do just that. As the children grew older, they started having their own lives. The 2 oldest boys, Richard Gene Jr. and Billy, married and made families of their own. In Simmons' mind, that was okay, but when his daughter, Sheila, met and married a man, Simmons fell apart. The man Sheila married, by all accounts, was a great man by the name of Dennis McNulty. Sheila told him everything that went on in the Simmons household, including who had fathered little Sylvia. McNulty took this information in stride, choosing to raise Sylvia as his own daughter. McNulty also made it be well known to Simmons that he would never touch Sheila again. Sheila, by her own accord, realized what her father had done to her was very wrong, and she smartly removed herself from the situation as best as she could. While she feared for her mother and her younger sisters, she knew she could no longer live under the same roof. The loss of his prized daughter devastated Simmons, and he fell into a deep depression. Throughout this time, he wrote letter after letter to Sheila, telling her how much he loved her and how much he wanted to have her back. It is unclear if the letters ever were answered, but Sheila remained steadfast with her husband. Simmons, after being rejected by his own daughter, vowed that he would not lose control of another family member. As such, he made the rest of the children do even more manual labor, even to the point of digging a 4-foot hole in the backyard. None of them could enter or leave the house without his say-so. It was like a prison. During this time, Simmons also cut off the phones and other forms of communication to the house. He wanted to have complete and total power. The kids were allowed to go to school and come straight home after. They were never allowed to go anywhere else. Although it has never been definitively proven, extended family members and officials believe he was abusing his younger daughters as well. It was, however, only Sheila that Simmons seemed to have the obsession with. She was his pride and joy, and he thought her stunning. As far as Becky, his wife, she was locked down more than any of them. Simmons would monitor her every move, even going as far as checking all of her mail. Once the older kids caught wind of this, they got her a post office box so she could write to them, and whomever else she wanted, without Simmons knowing about it. Becky talked about leaving many times, but could never bring herself to do it, partly because she was afraid for her life and her kids' lives if she ever decided to pack up and go. Still, a few days before Christmas in 1987, Becky made secret plans with her older kids to get out after the holiday. Sadly, it was a plan that would never see fruition. A couple of days before Christmas in 1987, the Simmons family had a gathering. All of the children and their families were in attendance. Though it is unclear in the order of which things occurred, Simmons shot all of the adults in attendance, and strangled or smothered all of the children. 4 of the adults lay by the Christmas tree, surrounded by lights and presents. One of the little girls, age 6, appeared to be sleeping peacefully in a bed, but she was also dead. 2 infants, those belonging to 2 of Simmons' sons, lay dead and wrapped in garbage bags in the trunk of a car. The rest of the family had been buried in the backyard, in that 4-foot hole Simmons made his family dig. All told, Simmons killed 14 members of his immediate family, including all of his children, their spouses, and their children. Even Sheila, whom he proclaimed to have loved the most. Sylvia, both daughter and granddaughter to Richard Gene Simmons, also died in the massacre. On December 28, 1987, Simmons decided to continue his murderous spree. He went to a few places where he used to work, trying to kill coworkers who had rebuked his advances, and bosses he didn't care for. Though he shot 6 additional people, only 2 of those died from their wounds. It was during these murders that Simmons was caught. He did not resist when the police came to get him. In fact, he gave himself up quite willingly. At first, the police knew nothing of the murder of his family. It was only when they went to the Simmons household to inform them of Richard Gene's arrest that they discovered the grisly scene inside. It was unclear exactly how long the family had been dead inside of the house, but the best estimate is they had been killed 1 or 2 days before Christmas. Much like his lack of resistance to being arrested, Richard Gene Simmons gave almost no resistance when he was being questioned. In fact, he readily confessed to all of the murders, placing the blame squarely on Sheila's shoulders. At the time, the police didn't understand why he would blame his eldest daughter. It was only after the trial that his abuse of her came to light. Simmons was tried and convicted of the 2 non-familial murders first. The defense attorney tried to get him marked as insane and unfit to stand trial, but Simmons himself argued against that. He didn't fight any of the accusations hurled his way, saying over and over again that he wanted to be executed. He got his wish. Simmons was sentenced to death. After that was settled, there was still the matter of the murders of the rest of his family, which caused something of a disturbance for Simmons. He figured he was already sentenced to death, and wanted to get on with the dying. The courts made him wait in prison, however, until he could be tried and held accountable for the rest of his crimes. Again, it was almost a formality, because he offered no resistances to the prosecution during that case, either. As with the first trial, Simmons was sentenced to death. While he was awaiting his execution, Simmons spent most of his prison time secluded from the rest of the general population. There are 2 big reasons why he wasn't welcome with them. the first is simply due to the nature of his crime. Even in prison, there is a code of standards, and doing harm against a child made Simmons a target. The other reason is because Simmons made the decision to waive his right to appeal. Other prisoners felt this choice set a bad precedent for their own cases, and would hurt them in the long run. Prison guards felt Simmons was in enough danger to keep him separated from everyone else. His wait on death row would turn out to be relatively short. In June of 1990, Simmons was put to death by lethal injection. He became the first man to die under Arkansas's death penalty rule. After he died, none of his family members would claim the body, so he was put in an unmarked, poor man's grave.